Hello guys, good day. Welcome back sa ating channel at welcome back para sa panibago na namang lecture. And today we are going to be talking about the subject Fire Technology and Arson Investigation. So this will be the summary lecture on the subject on the matters that we should know or you should be familiar of with regards to the subject matter. No? So without further ado, let's jump right into our discussion. So for today, we have the following topic right here. No? First is we need to define what is fire, of course. No, what is we need also to define the concept of fire suppression and fire investigation as well. And lastly, now we are going to have an overview with regards to the existing law on arson here in our country. Okay, so if you are interested with those type of topics, stand by and let's jump right into our discussion. So the first thing that we should discuss is we need to understand what's the concept of fire or what is fire in general. No? So the definition of fire here refers to the rapid oxidation of a material in the exothermic chemical process of combustion releasing heat, light, and various reaction products. So it's the consumption of some materials no, through the process of exothermic chemical process, no? Where if fire exists, no, it will release. No? This process of combustion will release the so-called the concept of heat, no, light, no, which can be seen through the flame and various reaction products such as we have the smokes and other products as a result of fire. Ngayon, no, when we are talking or dealing with fire, it's very important that we must understand the elements of fire. When we talk about the elements of fire, we are referring to the necessary ingredients that needs to coexist in order for fire to exist. So on the fire triangle, now we have there the so-called heat, no? We have the oxygen and we have the fuel. No? So this three elements here need to coexist before fire could exist. Now, for example, heat. No? Heat refers to the source of ignition. Ano ba yung pwede nating maging source of ignition? By the way, marami naman tayong pwedeng maging source of ignition. Like for example, coming from natural energy, coming from the radiation of the sun, no? The temperature that the increasing temperature because of the sunlight, no? Something like that. Yeah, that could be the source of ignition, di ba? Halimbawa, yung mga forest fire, ng mga wildfire, no? They exist because of extremely hot temperature and that ignites somewhat the different materials no, that are present within the area and fire could exist in that manner. No? So we have also the concept of oxygen. We need also oxygen in order to support the ignition. No? And in our, well, oxygen is the one of the most available type of gas in our surroundings kasi we have oxygen everywhere dito sa ating environment, no? So that's why we are breathing. So there's no problem with regards to oxygen because it's abundant in our surrounding, you know. So fire could exist in any places, no? Here in our surrounding, no? Because of course we have the oxygen, which is a type of flammable gas, no? That is necessary also in the existence of fire because it supports the ignition process, no? Then we have fuel. No? Pag sinabi natin fuel, guys, no? This refers to the different combustible materials. No? It could be either a piece of wood, no? It could be it could be a solid material, no? It could be a liquid material, it could be gases, no? It could be metals, no? So we have a lot of fuel in our surrounding. During the early days, they can create fire through friction of two different objects, yung mga kinikis-kis nila, no, na nagpro-produce ng energy, no, at with that energy alone, no, it causes to increase the temperature, therefore it produces heat, and they're going to match that with the combustible, highly combustible materials, yung mga madaling masunog, like for example, mga dahon, no, yung mga pinagkaskasan ng bamboo, no, yung mga madaling masunog, cotton, something like that, no, then fire could exist. So they are completing the three elements of fire, no, in order for them to produce the so-called fire. So these are very important, no, heat, oxygen, and fuel for the existence of fire. No, it's very important that we should understand the elements of fire. Why? Because the concept of fire control or fire suppression is also based on this following. No? Kasi sa fire suppression, you could either remove heat, no, reduce the heat in order to suppress the fire. No? You could also remove the oxygen in order to suppress the fire. Or you could either remove the fuel in order to suppress the fire. So the fire suppression activities is also based on the elements of fire. Kasi as we have been illustrating while back, no, that if one of these three elements of fire is not present, then fire will not continue to exist. No? It's very important also that we would mention the so-called fire tetrahedron, no? Yung kumbaga yung pang-apat na elemento ng fire, which is the chemical chain reaction, no? Which how do you call this? This process, no, will support the continuous ignition of the fire. So as long as it's being supplied with the elements, other elements, like for example, the fire is being kept to being supplied with fuel, no, or it has sufficient supply of oxygen or heat and so on, so it will continue to exist. Now, if none of those things will transpire, like for example, we remove some of its element, we are also removing the so-called chemical chain reaction, which could later on result into the burning out of the fire. No? So that's on the fire tetrahedron. I'm just mentioning it. No? Ngayon, so with regards to the elements, no, another thing that we should be familiar of is with regards to the classification of fire. No? Again, we are trying to classify the different types of fire because it's very important also that we should know the classification of fire, because under the fire suppression activities, no, meron tayong mga naka-base doon na meron tayong mga specific suppression activities, or hindi naman kaya mga specific fire extinguishing equipments that is only applicable to a specific types of fire. Now, which means that, for example, since water is the common fire extinguishing agent that we know of, no? Yung tubig, yun yung pamatay apoy na alam natin, na karamihan sa atin, no? Then there are limitations with the use of water as a suppressing agent, no? So that's when, no, dyan papasok yung tinatawag nating importance of classifying fire. Kasi for example, there's a burning appliances, no, nasusunog, halimbawa yung ref ninyo, no? Would it be right or proper to use water in order to suppress the fire in that manner? No, absolutely not. Kasi the water would react to the electricity present into the appliances, which could cause more damage. No? So there are different fire extinguishing equipments, no? And they are applied to a specific type or a specific classification of fire. That is why we need to understand first what are the different classification of fire. No? So we have here two categories, no? Classification of fire based on cause, no? Yung kung ano yung dahilan kung bakit nag-exist yung fire. And we have also another classification based on the fuel, no? Based on the fuel. Anong ulit yung fuel? Yun yung kumbaga nasusunog na material. Kung ano yung nasusunog, is it a piece of wood? Is it a chemical? Is it a liquid? No, something like that. Is it a gas? No, those are the fuel. No, ngayon, let's look onto the first classification, fire based on cause. So we have the so-called natural fire. No, these are fire that is caused by natural events, such as, for example, no, because of volcanic eruption, no, yung kanyang inimit na lava, no, yun yung sumunog doon sa surrounding, that is a natural fire because it is caused by natural phenomenon. No, we have also wildfire. No, yung mga wildfire that is caused by extremely hot temperature. No, dahil tumaas, uminit doon sa isang lugar, nagkaroon tayo ng mga forest fire or wildfire. No, that can also be classified as natural fire. No, yung mga tinamaan ng kidlat, then suddenly it starts burning. That is also a natural fire. Meaning, no one can be blamed, no, for the existence of fire in that area. No? For accidental naman, guys, no, so accidental fire are usually caused by either imprudence or negligence. No, for example, no, napabayaan mong nakasinde yung gas stove ninyo, no, napabayaan mong nakasaksak ng matagal or na-overload yung mga saksakan ninyo sa bahay that causes fire. Those are most likely accidental fire. No? Accidental siya. That's in contrast with the so-called intentional. Kasi ang intentional that most likely fall onto the so-called arson. No? Pag intentional, sinasadya guys, no, that would be a malicious type of fire. No? Ito yung kumbaga karaniwan na talagang pagtutuunan ng pansin ng ating mga fire officer with regards to investigation in order to determine the degree of liability, no, of the person who started the fire. So that's more on arson. No? Pag sa accidental guys, syempre meron ding liability somewhat dyan. Depende kung ano yung degree of negligence or imprudence ng isang tao, no, that will still be the subject of investigation. And as well as natural naman, no? Kasi well, all types of fire will be first considered as natural, no? Kumbaga, yun muna ang assumption until the point na ma-establish na talaga nila kung ano yung fire. Hindi yung pagpunta mo doon sa lugar, halimbawa na nasusunog, you have already a conclusion in your mind that this is intentional, this is arson. No. Now, you start first with the assumption that the fire was caused by natural phenomenon, and then you investigate to establish whether is it intended or whether is it accidental, whether is it natural, or whether is it intentional. So yun yung first na assumption mo, no? Pag pupunta ka sa isang bahay, isipin mo muna, could this be a natural crime, a natural fire, no? Wala namang may kasalanan. Then you are going to investigate thoroughly, no, and find out whether is it actually natural, or is it accidental, or is it intentional. No? Now, another classification of fire is based on fuel. No? So dito na papasok yung mga class A, class B, class C, class D type of fire. No? So when we talk about class A type of fire, no, ang mga nasusunog na materials dito are yung mga tinatawag nating common combustibles, no? Such as for example, wood, paper, cloth, no, grass, no, etc. Yung mga nasusunog, yung mga common combustibles, no? And for common combustible, usually you apply water for that matter, no? Ginagamitan niya ng tubig para patayin yung apoy, apulahin yung apoy, something like that. No? So yun nga, no, it's very important kasi for example, you are already a fire officer, you responded into a fire scene, no? Hindi ka agad bubugan ng apoy. You try to identify first, no, what type of fire is, what classification of fire is that. Baka mamaya naman, hindi pala siya class A, no? Kapag binugahan mo ng tubig, baka it will cause the rapid spread pa ng fire, then definitely you are already beating the purpose of fire suppression, ano? So it's very important that we should be familiar with the different classes of fire. Now, class A, common combustible materials, wood, paper, cloth, etc. No? For class B, no, ang mga nasusunog naman dito sa class B guys ay yung mga flammable liquids and gases, no? For example, gasoline, propane, solvents, no? Pag mga ganung bagay na yung mga nasusunog, that will be classified as class B, no? For class C fire, no, ang mga nasusunog naman dito ay mga live electrical equipments, yung mga appliances natin, computers, fax machines, no, and other appliances that is powered by electrical energy. Class C. Class C po yan, ha. Class D, no, yung mga combustible metals naman yung mga nasusunog, no, magnesium, lithium, titanium, etc. No, kapag metals ang mga nasusunog that would be classified as class D, no? And additional class, meron tayong class K na tinatawag, no? Yung mga nasusunog naman dito ay yung mga tinatawag nating combustible cooking media such as cooking oils, no? Yung mga fats, no? Yung mga kitchen oil, no? That would be classified as class K. Ang tawag natin usually dito, kitchen fire, no? Yung mga uh, apoy na nagbumula sa kitchen, at yung mga cause of fire is most likely the different cooking media such as cooking oils, etc. Okay? So those are the classification of fire based on cause, no? And based on the fuel. Now, if fire already existed, no, kapag nandyan na yung apoy, what should we do? We proceed with regards to the concept of fire suppression. No? What is fire suppression? Fire suppression means the process of slowing the rate of burning, no, or keeping the fire from spreading or holding the fire on an area. So, ang suppression is yung pag-apula natin sa apoy. No? It could be either done through slowing the rate of burning, papagalin natin yung pagkalat ng apoy, no, or hindi naman kaya is i-confine natin or i-isolate natin yung area na kung saan is mako-consume ng apoy, no? Those are all part of the fire suppression. We have the control and we have the extinguishment, no? Either we control the fire, no, para mamatay na lang siya eventually, or hindi kaya is we actively suppress, no, through the process of extinguishment. No, those are all the concept of fire suppression, no? Well, I didn't mention, but it's more important talaga dito that we are on fire prevention. Now, before fire suppression, first we need to learn about the concept of fire prevention. We should know, no, how could we avoid, no, the existence of fire, no, accidental or intentional, no, as much as possible. Kaya nga ang ating Bureau of Fire Protection is very active in their campaign, no, during especially during this month, no, sa buwan ng March, because it's known as the Fire Prevention Month, no. They're very active in their campaign on the different fire prevention activities, fire prevention strategies in order to solve the problem, no, para hindi na tayo magkaroon pa ng mga fire incidents and so on. So it's better that we practice the so-called, or we should be knowledgeable with the concept of fire prevention than fire suppression, kasi that's more reactive, ano. Syempre wala namang gustong may masunugan, no, kasi sabi nga nila, it's better na manakawan ka than masunugan, kasi pag nasunugan talagang totally, no, lahat ng properties mo, especially when we are dealing with our sa mga bahay natin, ano, mas okay na yung nanakawat ka kasi at least nandyan pa rin yung tirahan mo. Pero pag nasunugan ka, no, wala ka nang bahay, wala ka pa lahat gamit, no, and most likely, and ang pinaka-worst dun is kapag meron pang nawala sa mahal natin sa buhay. So it's better that we practice fire prevention than the concept of fire suppression. But in case, no, that fire already existed, then what should we do? No? Then we proceed. No, what should we do? So let's proceed to the concept of methods, no, yung fire suppression na tinatawag. Kanina, on the first part of our lecture, we made mention the significance of knowing the elements of fire. No, ano again yung elements of fire? We have heat, we have oxygen, and we have fuel. Now, why are they relevant to the subject matter? Why are they relevant to the methods of fire suppression? Because, no, in order for us to suppress fire, we need to interrupt, no, we need to remove one of the elements of fire, no, so that fire will not continue to exist. Yun yung konsepto, di ba? Tanggalin natin yung isang elemento ng fire, fire will not exist. We remove heat, fire will not exist. Or we remove oxygen, fire will not exist. We remove fuel, fire will not continue to exist. So that's why now I'm telling you that we should be familiar with regards to the fire triangle, so that when we are going to perform fire suppression, now we should know what specific method or technique should we apply in that matter. So we have here different methods of fire suppression, no. We have the process of cooling, no, yung cooling, Ano yung ini-eliminate natin sa fire triangle? Especially heat. Cooling is pabababain natin yung temperature so that there will be no sufficient heat to sustain the burning process. So ano yung pinaka-known kumbaga na cooling agent? Ano yung pang-suppress natin ng temperature ng fire? Usually, water. Okay, so we are using water in order to do the so-called cooling process. 'Di ba? Yun yung common na ginagawa natin. Pag may sunog, tubig agad yung hinahanap, sinasabuyan natin ng tubig. Anong ginagawa nun? Pinapalamig, binabawasan yung temperature, then eventually the fire will die out because there will be no sufficient heat to sustain the burning process. So that's cooling. However, as we have stated, not all the time we could apply water as a cooling agent. Effective siya in most types of fire, but then there are some incidents, of course, that it's not practical to use water as a means of fire suppressing agent. So that's when the other methods of fire suppression will comes in. Like for example, smothering. Smothering is focused on removing the so-called oxygen, cutting the oxygen supply. So they're using, pag dito gumagamit na sila ng special fire extinguishing agents, such as we have the fire extinguisher, and dapat ang component niya is yung CO2 na tinatawag carbon dioxide. So yung mga carbon dioxide fire extinguisher, yun yung mga ginagamit for smothering process because it removes or it suppress or it starves, ni-starve niya yung fire with oxygen supply. Yun nga yung mahirap kasi oxygen is very abundant into our surrounding. But then of course, pwede rin natin naman na nai-interrupt yung oxygen supply, cut off yung oxygen supply by overfeeding the fire with carbon dioxide. So pag may carbon dioxide, mababawasan ganyan yung oxygen supply ng ating apoy, and then eventually it will die. Another process for this is yung mga halimbawa is tinatakpan ng kumot, basa na kumot ay tatakip nila, para lang sa ganun is mabawasan yung pumapasok na oxygen sa apoy at pwede siyang mamatay eventually. So those are part of smothering. Anong binabawas natin? Anong inaalis natin sa elements of fire? Oxygen. Now we are cutting off the oxygen supply for the fire to die out eventually. So most of the time hindi siya effective sa mga malakihang sunog, but for places like for example fire that exists na nagsisimula pa lang dito sa loob ng pamamahay natin, ng mga establishment, that could be applicable also yung mga tinatawag nating smothering process or with the use of carbon dioxide fire extinguisher. Okay, we have also the process of separation. Sa separation, guys, ang inaalis natin sa fire triangle is the so-called fuel. You starve the fire, gutumin mo yung fire in order for him not to continue. Paano mo siya gugutumin? You remove yung mga fuel supply. Tignan mo kung ano pa yung mga pwedeng masunog doon, ialis mo doon, then definitely kung wala nang i-consume, wala nang i-consume yung ating fire, then it will no longer continue. So if it's possible that for example in a burning house, we try to interrupt with regards to the burning process by reducing yung mga pwedeng masunog, reducing yung mga fuel na pwede niyang i-consume. We could also eventually burn out the fire with that manner, separation. Halimbawa naman, if I don't know kung meron tayong mga gas pipeline dito sa atin, if in case meron tayong mga gas pipeline connected to different houses, that's usually what they're doing, kasi in other countries naka-base sila sa gas pipeline. It's not like in our country na we are using yung mga gasol na tinatawag, di ba? Ang source of gas nila para sa kitchen nila in other countries is through the pipeline, Parang naka-host na siyang ganun, directly connected to the different cooking appliances. So in those cases, what we can do is we should remove or cut off the gas supply on that area para hindi siya mas lalong lumala. So that's one. of the methods of separation. Pero dito sa ating bansa, most likely, we could do that by removing some materials that could be consumed by the fire, no, in order for the fire not to spread rapidly and not to continue burning, no, through the process of separation, removing the fuel from the source of fire, no? So that's what we can do. Okay. For interruption naman guys, I made mention of the other element of fire triangle kanina, no, yung tinatawag nating fire tetrahedron, no, or the chemical chain reaction. No, what we could do is we interrupt with that, no, through the use of different equipment such as fire extinguisher, no, or any other type of extinguishing agent, no, kasi pag nagkaroon tayo ng ganun, we are already reducing or interrupting the burning process, no, with the use of the fire suppressing agent. Okay, so those are the common method, no, of fire suppression activities applied to fire incidents. No, cooling, you remove the you reduce the temperature, no, in order to burn out the fire. No, smothering, we remove the oxygen supply. Separation is we remove the fuel supply. Interruption, we interrupt with regards to chemical chain reaction in order to put off the fire. Okay? Ngayon, we have also here yung mga tinatawag nating fire suppression equipments, most likely water and other fire extinguisher. No? Yung mga fire extinguisher na tinatawag. No? So, we have different type of fire extinguisher. I just mentioned some of the general type here, no? Pero marami pa dyan, no? Classified into 4, and they have their own purposes, no? Ang pinaka-common na suppressing agent, no, ginagamit natin most likely yung tinatawag nating water, no? Water is only effective for class A, no? Yung mga common combustible material, no? Wood, paper, something like that. Yun yung usually ina-applyan ng water as a suppressing agent. Yun yung binubuhusan natin ng tubig, no? Then we have also yung carbon dioxide fire extinguisher, no? Carbon dioxide based fire extinguisher, which is very effective for class B and C, no? Ano ba yung B? No, class B is most likely flammable liquids, and C is live electrical equipment. So doon naman siya effective guys. No, yun yung gagamitin natin kapag mga ganong uri ng fire ang ating papatayin. No? We have also mga dry chemical extinguisher. Effective siya for class A and C. No? So class A, common combustible materials. Class C, yung mga live electrical equipments. Okay? Then we also have yung dry powder, no? Dry powder is applicable for class D o yung mga tinatawag nating combustible metals. No, ay hindi na isali si class K. No? So we have a special type of extinguishing agent din sa mga class K type of fire, no? Wherein we are referring to those cooking oils or fire originating from the kitchen, no? And the source is most likely mga cooking oils, no? So we have also special type of extinguisher used for those scenario. Okay? Now, after we suppress the fire, what's next, no? Pag na-suppress na natin yung fire, ano nang susunod na gagawin? So we proceed with the so-called fire investigation, no? Fire investigation by its nature is the basis for the so-called fire prevention program, no? Medyo ang tingin kasi natin under fire investigation is the purpose of that is to determine the liability of one person relative to the incident that has transpired. Yun yung konsepto na alam natin eh. But actually, no, ang fire investigation also has the purpose of understanding, no? Kaya nga yung subject natin is fire technology, no? And arson investigation. Sa iba, fire behavior, no? Bakit natin kailangang pag-aralan yung fire behavior? That is for the purpose of fire prevention, no? Yan nga, no? The concept of fire investigation is not only for criminal litigation but also for us to come up with a better fire prevention program, no? Para makapag-develop tayo ng effective fire prevention program. Yan yung isa sa purpose why they are conducting fire investigation, to understand the nature of fire, to understand what causes fire to exist, to understand the behavior of fire in order for us to better to come up with a better program that could make us safe from the existence of fire. So isa yan sa purpose, hindi lang siya for litigation purposes. But of course, no, majority of the incidents that are being investigated is usually for litigation process. Pero wag na rin natin isaalang-alang that the one of the reason could be of fire investigation is to understand the sequences of fire, no, how fire starts, what enables it to spread, no, and something like how could it be controlled and something like that, no. So that's all for the purpose of coming up with a better fire prevention program. For fire investigation, we have another classification of fire according to causes, no, but they are closely related doon sa first classification natin kanina, na based on cause, di ba, we have natural fire, we have accidental, and we have intentional, no. Ang naiiba lang dito siguro is yung tinatawag nating unknown fire, no, which is most likely that's for litigation process, no, litigation purposes. So we have here for general causes of fire based on the concept of fire investigation. We have natural fire. We made mention of that kanina, yung mga due to natural causes such as yan, mga calamities, something like that. So that's more on natural fire. Accidental, no, it's caused by negligence or imprudence, no. Arson, yan na yung intentional fire na tinatawag natin. Yung kumbaga is ang dahilan kung bakit nasunog yung isang bagay o isang lugar is because somebody had a malicious intent to cause the burning. Yung nagsunog dahil nga meron siyang intention to destroy, no, something like that. Ang tawag natin dun, guys, arson, no. For those instances wherein the cause of fire is unknown, no, yung mga meron kasi tayong mga ganong instances, guys, na kung saan is we cannot really determine the cause of fire. For example, yung mga, di ba, yung fireball na tinatawag, something like that. If there's no clear indication as to the cause of fire, no, they label that as an unknown, no, unknown fire na tinatawag. Okay? And then we have here the so-called steps of fire scene investigation, no. So we have the step-by-step process here, no. Some other investigator might not be using this, but this is the very ideal steps in fire scene examination. First is that when you proceed into the crime scene, you search systematically, no, for possible evidences in order to understand or establish the reason of fire, no, something like that. You observe the fire scene, no, kung ano yung mga indicators na pwedeng maging basis natin to conclude whether ano yung origin ng fire, no, anong classification of fire yung sumunog dyan sa specific property na yan, something like that, no. Take photograph in order to document the fire scene just in case you need to reconstruct or just in case you need to provide evidences in court as to the damage, something like that, no. That's very important. Eliminate, no, that's when you conclude what type of fire is that, no, whether that's accidental, no, that is natural, no, that is intentional or something like that. You classify what type of fire ang nag-occur doon sa fire scene natin. Verify, no, if you have concluded already, now you need to verify it again by conducting another set of investigation, interview to witnesses, no, or to the victim. Take note of all the things that are transpiring into the crime scene as well as the different testimony being given by the witnesses and the victims or even suspects. No? Sketch is, you need to produce a sketch of the fire scene, no, to aid your photograph, no, para meron kang additional evidence as to the place, no, as to the property that was burned, no, to have a better picture onto the relation of different evidences. For example, asan dyan yung end point of entry, point of exit, no? Where did the fire originated based on your investigation? All of those things, no, will occur onto the so-called sketch, no? So those are the usual steps, no, that is applied in fire scene investigation, no, or examination. With regards to the areas to be investigated, no, you should always take into consideration yung exterior part, no. If we are talking about properties, buildings, and so on, do not exclude yung exterior part, no, sa labas ng property na nasunog. Because, no, from that, we could try to also to identify, no, if the fire started from the outside, or we could actually examine also whether there are some, signs of entry or signs of exit from the properties that was burned. Kasi baka mamaya, no, may nanunog doon sa bahay at pwedeng may mga ebidensya kang makalap doon sa paligid, like for example footprints, no, cigarette butts, no, matches, no, gasoline tank, or hindi kaya gasoline, yung gallons, no, and other possible instrument that was used to set up the fire, no, so that could be seen doon sa exterior part, so do not exclude that. Then after you examine the exterior part, no, you should proceed to the examination of the interior part, no, to determine the degree of damage, no, to determine what type of fire was that, no, the duration of fire, no. With regards to the duration of fire, it's very important to take note that of course the primary source of with regards to the duration of fire is the witnesses themselves, no, kasi sila yung nakakita, sila yung halimbawa tumawag sa bumbero, and from that on you have already an idea when the fire started and how long it remained until it was burned, until it was put off, no, until it was declared as fire, that the fire was suppressed already, no. And if you don't have, no, those kung wala yung mga ganong instances, no, actually you could also use yung mga electric clock or clocks that are present in the crime scene, no, that are not totally burned, no, like for example if there's a working clock doon sa loob ng property, syempre pag nasunog yan, titigil na yan, no, titigil na siya. So those could be the basis for you to establishing the duration of the fire, no, and manure. But as I've stated, the most likely, ang pinaka-basis when it comes to establishing the duration of fire is of course the moment that you receive the report, no, and until to the point that you suppress the fire, no. If there are witnesses, you could also ask the witnesses with regards to the duration of fire, no. So you can actually examine that by going or examining yung interior part, yung interior part of the property that was burnt. Okay? Yan. So those are with regards to fire investigation, no. Summary lang yun, guys. If you want to learn more on to those topic, no, I suggest that you read books relative to the subject matter, no, on fire behavior or fire technology and arson investigation. Okay, so proceeding on to the last part of our discussion, we will be talking about the law on arson, no? So we are basing our discussion on the PD 1613, the law that amended arson in the revised penal code. Arson is defined as any person, no, arson who will be liable for arson, no, any person who burns or set fire to the property of another shall be punished with prison mayor. So yung panununog na tinatawag nating property, no, property of another. Okay, that also applies or extends to those person who burns their own property, no? Yung mga sinunog nila yung kanilang sariling property under the circumstances that it could expose other person's property to danger, no, or di kaya naman yung mga buhay ng ibang tao. So that applies to both either you set the property of another on fire, no, or you set your property on fire, no, that would be considered as arson, no. So the punishment for the crime arson is likely prison mayor, no, that's 6 years 1 day to 12 years ang duration yan, no? Now we have two types of arson. Actually, we have in the so-called destructive arson and we have the special type of arson. No? Under the section 2 of PD 1613, no, sinasabi niya dyan that we have the so-called destructive arson wherein kapag ang sinunog ay yung mga ammunition factory, no? Kapag yun yung mga sinunog, that will be considered as destructive arson, no? It has a separate penalty, no? Iba yung penalty ng destructive arson, mas mataas siya kumbaga doon sa ordinary type of arson. So it will be considered as destructive arson if the following are the subject of burning, no? Marami to. For example, any ammunition factory or other establishment where explosives, inflammable, and combustible materials are stored, no? Any archive museum, whether public or private, church, no? Train, airplane, or aircraft vessels, no? Something like that. Those are all destructive arson, no? Anyway, you refer to PD 1613 to have the complete list on what are the specific establishments or buildings that will be that if subjected to burning will be considered as destructive. No? Meron tayong mga enumerated facilities doon. No? Ang magiging parusa kapag destructive arson will be reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua. Reclusion temporal, that's 12 years to 20 years, no? Reclusion perpetua, that's 20 years to 40 years. So, mas mataas ang parusa niya comparing doon sa ordinary type of arson na tinatawag natin, no? We also have the second classification of arson, yung mga tinatawag nating special case of arson, wherein if the properties that was subjected to fire or subjected to malicious burning is the following: any building uses office of the government, no, or any of its agencies. So pag mga government facilities, that is special case of arson. The punishment is also ranging from reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua, no? Any uninhabited dwelling, house or dwelling, yung mga bahay na wala nang nakatira, that is also under the special type of arson. And industrial establishments such as shipyard, oil well, or mine shaft, platform or tunnel, plantation, farm, yung mga pasture land, guys, yung mga palayan, maisan, tubuhan, kapag yan yung mga sinunog, no, that will be considered as special type of arson. Rice mill, cane mill, mill central, something like that. Railway, bus station, airport, no, warehouses, that will be considered as special type of arson. Mas mataas din po ang parusa niyan, ano? Kaparehas halos nung tinatawag nating destructive arson, no? Ang parusa, reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua din po yan, no? Lastly, is with regards to the so-called special aggravating circumstances. Ibig sabihin, if you committed arson in this manner, patataasin nito yung magiging parusa mo. So, from prison mayor, which is 6 years to 12 years, no, patataasin niya kapag meron tayong mga ganitong elements. Such as, for example, no, you committed arson with an intent to gain. Or the concept of insurance fraud, di ba? Meron tayong mga ganitong napapanood na kung saan is dahil nalulugi na yung kanilang negosyo, no, pinapasok nila sa insurance company yung kanilang negosyo at intentionally sinusunog para nang sa ganun ma-declare nila na damage yung kanilang negosyo at magko-collect sila ng tinatawag nating insurance. That's insurance fraud. So if that's the motivation for burning the property, no, that will be considered as a special aggravating circumstances. Tataas po ang magiging parusa mo if proven that you had committed that, no? Another special aggravating circumstances is if committed for the benefit of another. Like for example is nakiusap ka, no, sa isang kakilala mo, o di kaya nagbayad ka ng isang tao na siya yung magsusunog sa bahay mo, no, na naka-insurance ng malaki para nang sa ganun ay makakolek ka ng insurance, something like that, no? That could also be considered as special aggravating circumstances. If the offender is motivated by spite or hatred towards the owner or occupant of the property burn, another special aggravating circumstances din po yan, no? Naiinggit ka sa kapitbahay mo kasi asensado na yung buhay niya, kaya sinunog mo yung bahay niya. No, that could also be considered as special aggravating circumstances. Another and lastly is if the arson is committed by a syndicate. Okay? So far, no, those are the topic that I had prepared for you to this subject matter 5, technology and arson investigation. If you have question or additional inputs with regards to the topic we discussed, feel free to comment on the comment section. That's it for today, guys. I hope I was able to impart some knowledge with regards to the topic that we discussed. That's it for today. See you guys on the next lecture.